So starting with this story, it all started on February 24th in the year 2022. Alla and Petro, they were living in the city of Irpin, which is a suburb of Kiev, and they stepped outside their home and there were missiles just touching down blocks from their house. And above them, Alla described that there were more helicopters than she could count. And it was then they had to make the decision to flee the country, or to flee to the west side of Ukraine as soon as possible. So Alla, she packed up her things, she left to the west side of Ukraine, and Petro, her husband, he stayed back in case of a draft to fight. While Alla was driving from Irpin to Kremenets, she was trying to get to this town Zhytomyr, which is in between Kremenets and Irpin. And she described this drive as one of the scariest moments of her life, just because on this drive, the news tells you about a lot of things in this war, but they don't tell you about how there's people passing out in their vehicles out of fear. There's missiles touching down just blocks from your car, and while she was driving there were Ukrainian tanks just flooding the road, trying to get back to the city that she was fleeing, to the city where she had just left her husband. And these tanks were full of young men who reminded her of her son. And it was then it really hit her that my country is in a full-scale war. And there are families attached to these people who are sending their sons and sending their loved ones off to this war. So Alla, she eventually reached the city of Kremenets, and when she was there, she made a foolproof plan with Petro, her husband, back in Irpin, about what they were to do next. And they decided that if the border were to crowd up, people trying to flee the country, that she would try to escape across the Poland border over to Munich, where Yeva, Kostia's sister, was studying ballet. So the next morning at 5 a.m., there was a major bridge that led into the city of Irpin, and Ukrainian soldiers blew up that bridge as a defense to stop Russian soldiers from getting into the city. And Petro decided that, okay, I need to act fast, I need to get out of the city now, or I won't be getting out at all. So he took the refugees that were staying in his home, and they tried to escape the city, taking back roads and fields, and what ended up being a 3-hour trip ended up being about 12 hours, just trying to escape being shot down on the road from Russian tanks and soldiers. Before he could reach the city of Kremenets, Alla, she noticed that the border of Poland was crowding up too fast. So she had to flee to the border in order to get to Yeva. So in a matter of 24 hours, Alla was at the border of Poland. Petro was in siege on his way to Kremenets, and Yeva was in Munich. Kostia was in America, and Alla, Kostia's great aunt, she was with Alla on their way to Munich, and Svetlana was still in Ukraine. So in a matter of 24 hours, they were scattered across the world. And the only thing that mattered to them was this hope that they clung to find reunion with each other, and this hope that each other was going to be okay. Kostia, the morning of February 24th, called me, and he was just in tears when he called me, and I started running scenarios through my head. Did he just fail an exam? Did he crash his car? Did he get injured? But his next words, I never would have expected his next words, and that was that Russia is firing missiles on my home. My mother is fleeing the country, and my father is stuck in Irpin. And in the following weeks to come, Kostia was struggling with how do I keep going with my normal routine when my family is fighting for their lives. And his mother's last words were sticking with him that we are at war, and if anything happens to us, we need to take care of Yeva. And the thought that my parents might not make it out of this alive, that I'm going to be the only one that's in charge of my sister, was what really, really stuck with Kostya, and what made it difficult for him to keep going with his normal routine and not be there with his family. There were 2 weeks that passed by, and we were sitting in our living room watching the news about everything. And Kostya, he stands up out of his chair and he's like, "Stop the TV, pause it now." And so I pause it, I rewind it a little bit, and on the front screen on the TV is his best friend. He's holding a giant rifle in one arm and his baby girl in the other. And this was really eye-opening, because once you connect war with somebody that you love, it becomes that much more powerful and amplified in your mind. In the next few weeks, Kostya struggled a lot, and he went down to visit a family friend in the state of Georgia. Her name is Antoinette. He expressed these same concerns with her. I don't see why we're just sitting here doing nothing. I need to do something. And she went over a story about her friend, a friend that she had who was attending the seminary. The seminary is where they train to be pastors. He was attending the seminary around the time of 9/11, and he walked up to the seminary president and said, why are we just sitting here? We're going to school every day, and our country is under attack. We need to be doing something. And the seminary president said, "No, you don't understand. Out there, they're fighting for lives, and in here, we're fighting for souls. And the most important thing that you can do right now is cling to that thought that everything is in God's hands, and He ultimately has the most power in the whole world, and He will keep them safe." So then we turn to this painting. You see Kostya sitting here praying. There's this unknown light source coming in from the right, and there's smoke kind of surrounding and hugging him. And the smoke is represented by a verse from Ecclesiastes: meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless. That word meaningless, translated into Hebrew, is hevel, which translated literally back means smoke or vapor. And that's because you can't grab onto it, it's out of your reach. So the same way that the war and Kostya's family's turmoil was out of his reach, all he could do was pray about it and pray that our God would take care of it. So shifting to this painting, Kostya's family has always revolved around dance, and Yeva has embraced it fully. She's a ballet dancer at SAB, the America Ballet Company in New York, and this painting describes kind of a still moment that she has while dancing, because throughout this entire time, while her family is at war and her country is at war, she has to balance her life as a ballet dancer, a very prestigious company and a very prestigious program, and balancing her family's turmoil soon got just super duper wacky and out of balance. So this painting describes movement from, you see kind of like this black drips, and it kind of leads your eyes to her bottom left hand. The movement in this painting represents the movement in a dance. And the reason why she's painted in black and white is because she's still. It's like a secret that you're seeing. A moment that a lot of people didn't see in this moment was a lot of times when Yeva, before she would step out onto a stage, she's crying just moments before, wondering if her family's okay. She hasn't heard from them in weeks. And she has to put a smile on her face and get out on the stage and perform to her greatest. because her career and her life depends on it. So the chaos and the orange paint around it and the drips kind of represent the chaos that was just surrounding her, and this story that kind of consumed and engulfed her. But she had to stay strong, and she had to stay calm and quiet and trust that God would take care of it. It was in his hands. So moving on to this painting, Alla, Kostia's mother. When Alla was in Kremenets, she received a phone call from a friend who is living in the city of Bucha, the twin city to Irpin, where they lived. And she explained to Alla, she said, "Pray for us. They have already begun shooting people in the streets." And so after that phone call, Alla hadn't heard from her friend for 3 months. And she received a phone call 3 months later, and she found out that her friend was living in a bunker for 3 months with 15 other people and her newborn baby, because Russian soldiers were living in her home. And this really was hard for Alla to hear, because when she heard that, she's in Munich, and she has to balance out the fact that my friend is just had a newborn baby, she's in a war zone, and I can't do anything about it. I have to keep going with my routine, and how can I distract myself? And I haven't heard from my husband in weeks. I don't know if he's alive. I don't know if he's okay, if my other family members are okay. And so Alla, once she had reached Munich, she had made it to Java, and she described that feeling as her knees just buckling beneath her, and she's just super exhausted from driving for 3 days straight, but so overjoyed that her daughter was okay. But she signed up for this program that helped other Ukrainian ballet dancers get into get into other countries and out of the country of Ukraine, and bring them to safety. So this painting is a painting of the Ukrainian flag in the background, and which also represents a scenery, so like a blue sky touching a wheat field, blue over yellow. And she's reaching out to an unknown source, an unknown hand, that represents the people that she pulled out of the country in order to bring them to safety and place their families into homes and them into schools. Petro, Kostia's father, he, throughout this entire time, as this is going on, he remained in Ukraine. He's seen a lot of things that are really, really hard to comprehend, a lot of things that are hard to explain. But while he was in Ukraine, he would drive people around Ukraine to the Poland border in order for them to escape. And then he would just do things to help out around Ukraine, like delivering food and heaters and things like that, because throughout this time it was winter, and generators for electricity. And he would pick up vehicles from the Poland border and drive them to the front lines for the military to use. Petro described being in Ukraine as just this awful feeling of knowing or thinking, I haven't seen my son in 4 years, and I don't know if I will ever see him again. I don't know if I will ever see my daughter perform again. I don't know if that moment in Irpin was the last time I saw my wife. And while all these thoughts are streaming through all of our heads, we receive a phone call from Petro that he received a draft to fight in the war. And this was really complicated because the thoughts almost felt like reality. You know, the only thought that could come into Kostia's head is, I'm never going to see my father again, and my only reunion with my father will be in heaven. And luckily God provided us with a miracle, and he went in to go get a medical examination, and they said that we don't want you fighting in this war because of your past past injuries in dance. So Petro was allowed to leave the country, so he left the country that same week, and they applied for the Ukrainian refugee program in America. So as they were applying for the Ukrainian refugee program, Oscar was one of the little bumps in the road that we had to deal with. It took more paperwork to get Oscar over to America than it did to get any of them over. And I remember Kostya just pulling out his hair, thinking, this dog is giving me so much hardship. But it was so important for all of them to be reunited, all the way down to the dog. They hadn't seen each other in months, and this was an amazing opportunity for them all to be together as a family for the first time in 4 years. This painting has the Ukrainian flower, the sunflower, poking through and kind of surrounding Oscar, just because Oscar is as much Ukrainian as any of his family members. He only responds to Ukrainian, and the reason why the paperwork is here is just because it's representative of how hard it was to get him over here to America. Here, this is Svetlana and Alla. Alla on the right, she went with Alla, Kostya's mother, to Munich to visit Yava, or to get to Yava. And as they were applying for the Ukrainian refugee program, she decided that I don't want to go to America, and she had the same goal of reunion, but she wanted to be reunited with her twin sister Svetlana back in Ukraine. So this painting describes the most recent situation. She is in a bunker. It depicts both of them in a bunker where they are living day to day and still now, just trying to survive and avoid Russian missiles that are still touching down today. But they're still well, and we hear from them every once in a while. So that's it. Now, Kostya's family, they're all in America now. MLC, their Kostya's college, they sponsored them all to come over to America. And it's really important just to kind of grasp onto that feeling of hope that they had throughout this entire thing, and this sense of reunion with each other. Just this constant chase to trust in God and chasing after the fact that our Savior is going to get us all together. And it's so amazing seeing that day, everything is stripped from you. All the material things in this world don't matter. But now they've been able to get their feet back on the ground and are living in America today. Yeah. So do you guys have any questions at all?
I was wondering, do you have any sense of what it's like in the bunker, like what size they are?
So when I described Alla's friend in Bucha living in a bunker, it was really a food compartment, like think of a food storage room. So there's like cans lining the walls, it's underground, just a lot of dirt. In this case, it's probably more basement like, so think of just a regular basement size, I'm assuming. I don't know, would you agree with that, Kostya?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah. My mom's friend that was in Bucha, they had a basement, and in a lot of the old houses, they'll have like a basement compartment because it's colder and cooler, and that's where they store a lot of their canned goods. And that's where her and a lot of the people, and that pretty big basement with stored food and stuff for winter, and that's where they had to live for 3 months because of the Russian soldiers occupied their house at the moment. And they would bring up people from they knew that people were in the basement, so they'd bring them up for the interrogation. Her husband was supposed to be executed like 3 times. Like he was brought up for the execution, and then he was brought back down because they changed their mind, and they brought him up back again. and then they brought them. So they were like interrogating people, seeing if they know anything, what views they have, and then they ended up, and then they were gonna execute him for the fourth time. But then by the time they came around to it, our soldiers actually reclaimed the town, and they were able to be evacuated and saved by our troops. But and he had like major mental health issues because multiple times he thought he was gonna die. Like they were putting him in a shooting lane, and they didn't shoot him, and then they brought him back down.
Something interesting about the title of this show, Time of Sepulpalo, but not all is lost. So it's after a Ukrainian poet, Shevchenko, and he was a Ukrainian serf back in the day, and he was kind of shown to like free serfdom or free slaves because of his poetry. That's the short story behind it. But there's his words posted on billboards in Ukraine, and every time a Russian troops will defeat a city, they will cover up that billboard, and then once Ukrainian soldiers take it back, they will reveal his words, Time of Sepulpalo, not all is lost. Yes.
Mr. Skrank, I have a question. Can you tell us, like, we see the prints on the wall, what is the real life-size pictures are like? Can you describe them? Like, what is their sizes like?
Yeah. These paintings in real life are actually 6 feet tall by 4 feet wide, so they're very, very big. Very, very hard to transport. But much bigger than what you see right now.
Any particular reason that you make them that big?
Yeah, so the reason why I made them that big is because, well, for one, I like working big. And then for two, I felt that it was worth it for this story. I think that, especially when I think of me as an artist, I put my best foot forward, and that's in my head working bigger and being able to display them and make a powerful move on the viewer. So you have the ability as an artist to affect your viewer just by the moves that you make as an artist. And I think that if you were to see these paintings in real life and to the scale that they actually are, it would have a much more powerful effect on you than versus this size of a painting.
Yeah.
And
I would have to say I've seen them in person, and I would say use the words arresting or striking. Like they have a presence. Each one just draws you in, especially with the colors, and
yeah, and that's why I feel it's important to have that effect on the viewers, just because this story is so prominent and so important for people to get, and they look at this and they think, okay, what's this about? It's so big, it takes up my vision.
So where are your paintings?
So a company called Hearts and Hands, they bought the paintings, so they're on tour around the United States. They're right now currently in Hearts and Hands is going to bring them to St. Croix actually next year. And then they're going to be, they're at a few churches. I'm not sure exactly where they are right now. But
they travel.
I know they were, they travel, yeah.
You're traveling.
Yeah, I don't really hear anything. I'm glad I'm not in charge of following them around anymore.
Is it on what's it?
It is on
what's it
canvas. Yep, I built the frames and stretched all the canvases, which honestly was probably one of the more harder parts of this whole project, was building the
Yeah.
canvases. But I like building, so it was fun.
Okay. I was just looking, you have winter, it looks like, dressed winter.
Yes.
Is Ukraine, I don't know much about their weather. Is it, I think about Minnesota, we have a good
Yeah.
9 months
Very,
at
very
times
cold
with
weather, yeah.
coldness, but is it similar? Like, what would you compare it to?
I'd say it's similar, but their winters are probably a tad warmer, like just a tiny bit.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's not Minnesota.
Yeah, it's not Minnesota, but
warmer.
it does get colder in the winter.
So you've been here for a normal winter?
Yeah, oh
Because
yeah.
Last winter was not normal.
Oh,
No.
Well,
I've
so
been
it
living
wasn't
in
that way.
Minnesota for pretty much all my life.
Oh, okay, so you know.
So I understand a Minnesota winter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ukrainian winter is like the winter we had here, maybe a little colder and a little more snow. So it's mild. You can probably wear a hoodie if you're a Minnesotan and you're used to Minnesota
Oh,
weather.
like
You
this
probably
year.
can wear. If you came to Ukraine, you could probably wear a warm hoodie all winter long. They have 4 seasons. It's cold. It gets to like a little below 0 degrees Celsius, so like 20, 25, 10 degrees of Fahrenheit, but it would never go below 0 degrees Fahrenheit usually.
But I would assume, like, especially in this painting, they're also not Minnesotan. They're probably not used to the cold. And then also it's in a basement, so you're thinking about
Humidity.
kind of just that lower, like, metal surrounding you, not as much insulation.
So you said you've been in Minnesota most of your life.
Yes. Yep. I used to live in Washington State.
How about you?
I moved to the United States 8 years ago.
8.
8 years. Yeah. I went to high school. I went to Luther Preparatory School in Watertown, Wisconsin. Then after graduating high school, I went to Martin Luther College, and now I graduated Martin Luther College, and right now I'm working at St. Croix Lutheran Academy as a religion teacher, dorm supervisor, and a wrestling coach.
That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. But that's why around when the war came, Kostya hadn't seen like his family in about 4 years, just because he had been going to school, and there were talks of war
And there's also COVID.
beforehand and COVID, so he wasn't able to fly over. Yeah.
COVID started my freshman year of college, and it went up all the way until my senior year. So all 4 years of college, I couldn't come home.
But you went back to visit when you were in high school.
Yeah.
Summers.
Right after I graduated high school, before college, that was the last time I visited.
Is the wheat, I hear that Ukraine has large wheat production. Is
Yeah,
that kind of why
known
you
for their
did,
bread.
kind of why you did the wheat in that one
Correct.
picture?
And that's what it stands for in the flag. So you see the
Yeah.
blue on top and the yellow on the bottom. The yellow stands for a wheat field and the sky touching the wheat field.
Oh.
Yes.
Can you tell us about the drips on the paintings? Most of those paintings have some sort of drips on them. Who has inspired you to use that technique of drips on the paintings? That's kind of a bold move, considering that you could possibly ruin the painting by dripping paint on it. So what moved you to be using drips technique that you've used in your paintings?
Well, nobody really inspired me to do it. I kind of just did it. But in a lot of times, like the drips in a painting will be acrylic based, and then the people or the clothing that they're wearing is oil based, and acrylic naturally avoids oil. So then, especially, I don't have to be afraid like in yabas. There are some oil drips that kind of travel over her hand, which are more strategically placed. But then acrylic drips will kind of map around her hand and around her figure, which kind of allows just the chaos. And the reason why there's oil and acrylic drips in there is because it's like, okay, chaos behind her, chaos surrounding her at the same time. And then a lot of times, some of the drips in there are really just me experimenting with the paint. I love to just kind of sometimes go for it at the beginning of a painting. Like Olives was really just a big pane of glass full of oil paint that was just kind of smashed on there. And it helps you, and that was like the first thing I did. And the reason why is just because a lot of times I'm like, it stops you from having like a block. Instead of thinking, you're kind of just doing. So you're going for it, and then that will help you kind of continue going and give you a little bit of direction as well with your paintings. So, and then I decided in a lot of them to let that show through just because I feel like it adds a unique characteristic to each painting and enhances the story that it's telling.
How long does it take to paint something like that?
So all of these paintings together, I started in July and I ended them in April. So, what months is that?
Most of the year?
Yeah,
So
probably,
did you actually have a picture of them?
yes,
So, and then you just created from that?
correct,
the
Yep.
idea?
correct, yep, I had a picture of them, it was hard to get Oscar's photo.
He just
But-
was difficult always.
Yeah.
And those passport pages, are they like passed application? or-
Yeah, those are all documents that don't have any sensitive information on them and copies of his paperwork, yes. And they're like, spray adhesive, onto the paintings, yeah. The ones of Alla and Svetlana in the bunker, so that was kind of 2 photos, 3-ish kind of put together, so it's kind of going off of a series of photos and going from there as well.
So when you were painting these, was that, so in July, was that after they had all been reunited already, or were they some still like, you're not sure if they're gonna be okay?
No, they were still in Ukraine and they made it in December. They came over in December and they were able to make it, all of them were able to make it for the capstone showcase, except Yala, she was still studying dance. Yeah. But Alla, Pedro, and Kosio were there to make it and they were able to speak at my capstone showcase. Yeah. And talk about, it's really interesting hearing from Pedro, especially just because of the stories that he has to tell and the things that he's seen is very eye-opening.
The Petra paintings, I can't help myself but think it might be a little unfinished. Why did you decide to leave it as it is?
So, kind of similar to the drips. I started with his face, obviously, and then I went to his hands. And instead of bringing the focus on the different portions of the body, kind of just mapping out where those things are going to go and showing an essence of him being there, and then giving the idea that he's in a car. Like, you don't doubt for a second that he's not in a vehicle, just because of that window that's coming across and his position that he's sitting in. And just another thing that kind of enhances the meaning behind it, but then also doesn't stray focus away from what's important. So just the fact that he spent all of his time in Ukraine driving and bringing Ukrainian vehicles to the front lines is the most important thing in this painting. So then you can kind of have a little fun with it, you know. You're thinking about, okay, as long as it has the meaning that I want it to and the meaning that I want people to focus on, then that's the most important thing. And now I get to have fun just dancing on the canvas, you know.
The colors are fun. I mean, some pretty colors.
Thank
The
you.
orange and the red. Yeah, with the blue there. Pretty.
So how did you find out that your town had been attacked?
Do you wanna go?
Just from the news or
Well,
somebody
Phone
contacted?
phone call.
Oh,
It was actually very shocking. I was just studying in my room. It was 11 o'clock. No, it was like 9 or 10 o'clock at night at MLC. In Ukraine is 8 hours ahead, and I think it was daylight savings time.
5 a.m.
So it was 5 a.m. of their time, 4 or 5 a.m. of their time, and it was like breaking news. And I wasn't checking my phone. It was breaking news that like Russia has moved in with a full-scale invasion. My friend ran into my room, said, "Hey, you're watching news at all?" And I'm like, "No, I'm studying Hebrew right now." And he's like, "You have to see it." And he shows me, and I'm like, "Oh no!" And it's just like the full-scale war started. Like it was just like live streaming. There was like some American reporters in Ukraine that were live streaming everything that's happening. And I looked at my phone, and sure enough, I had a bunch of missing phone calls from my parents. So I called my mom immediately, and they were pretty much already on the road. And at the time, they were about to leave the house, and the only reason they didn't left, so they woke up from missile strikes, but they were hiding in the house and waiting because they had a couple of friends that were gonna come with them, and they had some car issues, so they were waiting for them. And then my mom, her best friend, her husband, they got sick, very badly sick with COVID. Was having a hard time breathing, and he was actually thinking going to the hospital the next day, but he stayed back at our house. And my dad was gonna leave, but then when they drove a couple blocks away, he told to stop the car, and he actually just walked back home. He said, "No, I'm probably just gonna stay back, take care of the friend, and just hang out at home in case somebody needs help, in case I need it, to help out with the war." So he stayed back, and then my mom and her best friend then left. So, but that's how I found out. Is I called them back, and we've had a quick, very brief conversation. That's when my aunt told me. Said, "Hey, they're shutting down the signal right now so that people to minimize the communication." And she said, like, "We're probably not going to be able to talk to you very much." So she said, "If you can't hear from us at all, make sure you take care of your sister." So.
But when it first started, I think a lot of us in the U.S. Had the sense that Russia would probably win pretty quickly. Were you surprised by the resistance?
Yeah, but it's hard when you're only on the defense and not on the offense, too. But yeah, I'm surprised it's still going. I don't even know really what direction it's heading. I don't think.
Nowhere. It's stalemate. But it's not a good stalemate. They're drafting more people. They have bigger military, so I don't know. We'll see. At that point, everyone just wants people to stop dying. That's what my parents want. They don't know how the war is gonna end. They just want people to stop dying. But the scary part is that, in the end of the day, my parents, it's almost like they don't want victory. For them, the biggest victory is to have as little people die as possible. But to stop fighting isn't the solution, because my city has showed very well what can happen if you stop fighting. Because our soldiers, they blew up the bridges, but they retreated very quickly. That's when my dad got lucky to escape. And when Russian soldiers got into our town, they occupied it for a couple of months. And then when our soldiers took over our town, in March, Russian troops moved into our town, Bucha and Irpin. It's right outside of Kiev, and that's where they got stuck. And then in beginning of June, I think Russian soldiers retreated. That's when they started retreating back north, and our soldiers started to kind of kick them back. And they claimed the town back, multiple towns. It was Bucha, Irpin, and Hostomel, and those were the towns where I grew up and where I lived. They found over 500 murdered innocent people, children, kids, parents, and those were just civilians, like not soldiers. That were going into people's houses, and if you spoke Ukrainian or you had anything for Ukrainian, even just a small flag, which you would assume most of the people do, like in America, you would probably have an American flag at home, you get murdered, you get killed, you get executed right away. People were sent up for questioning. If you speak Ukrainian or you have any pro-Ukrainian views, you get killed right away. So it's more of a genocide than a war. So it's almost like you don't want to fight anymore because you don't want people to die, but you're afraid if you stop fighting, what's going to happen? People are going to be killed. And Russia has proved to do that over the history. They have killed people with starvation during USSR, 1930s. Millions of Ukrainians died from Holodomor. Ukrainian language and culture has been banned over. The USSR has passed over 100 policies throughout its time to ban Ukrainian language and persecute Ukrainian culture. So it's almost like the only option we have left is to fight. Otherwise, people either gonna have to escape or they're gonna be killed by genocide. So.
Yeah, a very difficult situation to deal with, but then also recognizing like that hope that we have, that and that trust